the video?
No. How could I?
Okay, well, don't worry. I'm recording it, and then I can upload it to YouTube later.
All right. But you put another software, perhaps. You put
no.
no.
You can do it right in Skype. Yeah.
Okay.
But you have to have the latest version of Skype. So if your version of Skype is old, it might not do it. But mine does it, and I already tested it last night. So I'm recording. So let's go. We only have 20 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. So I have it all set up here. I did a little bit of Julia Child situation. She's the cook who would always pre-prepare her stuff. So I already prepared. I tightened these on too tight. I already prepared
of the stuff.
Basically 2 examples. One example is a 90-degree example. So let's see if I can see myself here so I can make sure I'm, won't let me display. Okay. Anyway, this is a 90 degrees example where it fits on 90 degrees like that.
Yeah.
We'll do that one first. And then the other one I did was a 45-degree example, so it fits like this.
Okay.
This one you have to slightly alter the technique once we do the lashing, because when you put the string around, it will slide down the tube and won't stay taut, so you have to use a little bit of CA to tack it each time you go around. So I'll show you that. But first, the starting point was I entered the information, just like we did when I was back in Bordeaux a few days ago, of the tube, the inner and outer dimension of the tube that you're cutting, and then the outer diameter of the tube that you're going to, and the angle. So this is the pattern for the 45 degree, and this is the pattern, or sorry, that was the pattern for the 90 degree, and this is the pattern for the 45 degrees. Okay. And then what you do is you cut this out pretty close to the edge here, but I leave this little strip, this white strip at the top, because that gives you some extra paper to tape it on.
Yeah, but when you put it around the tube,
yes,
this is the exact dimension. The 2 extreme line.
These 2 lines, this line and this line should match. Here, I'll just do it. I'll do it very quickly. I'll just cut it out. I'm not going to try to get this exact, but I'll just do an example. So if this was going to be a 45, you cut the thing out. You would cut closer to the line here, but you leave this strip there, and then you just put it around like this, and you have this extra little bit of paper. You line it up, make sure that you carefully align these edges so they're straight. That way it's going to be perpendicular.
Yeah, okay. If
you get that messed up, it won't be straight. And then this line should match pretty closely with the line below it.
Okay.
This line here. And then you just basically take some tape. I had some tape. Well, I would use clear tape, but for this example, I'm just going to use some tape here, masking tape. And then you basically just tape it here. And you tape it all the way up and down this joint. You would get this as close as you could up to here. And then you tape this whole thing, and then you put a couple pieces of tape here. And I can show you the example and one that I've done. I turned over the edges of the tape so that it's easy to pull back up.
Okay.
And if you have one where you have to align both ends, so you have two tubes here, and you have this tube in between, and you have to get the distance exact. What I do is I cut one end, I cut the other end a little bit long, maybe 3 or 4 millimeters long, but with the same pattern. And then you test fit it, and you see how far you have to move it, and then you can just remove the tape here, slide this down a little bit, tape it on again, and then remove more material and try again. And you can just work it till you get it exactly the right fit. Now, it doesn't have to be a perfect fit, because basically we're just doing this to tack glue the 2 together, and the thing that really provides the strength is the lashing. But you want to get it pretty close.
I just noticed that there's a form inside. Do you glue with the cyanoacrylate, or
with the what?
the form inside the tube. Do you glue it with the CA glue or?
No, I glued it with. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to show that example in a second. So now that I've shown you how I did this, what the part I'm not doing on this video because it's too messy to do here inside the house, is this. This was a straight tube, and what I did is I used it as its own cutter with foam. This is pink foam, but you can use the blue foam you have. This is only I think maybe 20 millimeters thick, and the stuff you have is 50, which is better because I had to do two pieces of this for this one because it was too short to have the foam hold the whole gap on the 45-degree angle of the piece. So if you do 50, you'll have a nice deep piece of foam in there. And so what I did was I basically just used the foam as its own cutter like this and just went like this, kind of twisting back and forth. And then you get a plug of stuff. And then I popped it out of the back side. Okay. And then I took the 5-minute epoxy.
Okay.
And I'm not going to do this now, but I put the 5-minute epoxy on, and I just put the 5-minute epoxy around here, and I put the plug back in and let it cure. Okay. Then I put the pattern in place. Okay, put the pattern in place right up to the top, and then I took you can do this on the bandsaw or you can use a Dremel, but I basically made a V cut to remove most of the material, being very careful not to go too far. And then there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can take it on the bandsaw and very carefully nibble, just do little 1 millimeter sections at a time to nibble most of it away. Hold on just 1 second. I lost a prop. Or you can take the Dremel with this is the sanding piece, but you can put that disc of like that carbon fiber disc, the abrasive disc, and then you can just clamp the Dremel down and you can do the same thing. You can go zzz, 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 like that to basically just do little slices until you get most of the shape. Then you switch to the sandpaper, the cylindrical sandpaper, and you just very carefully go in and exactly match it up. Be careful because the foam is very soft. Sometimes we do this with end grain balsa. You take balsa wood on the end grain and you do it like that, and that's a little bit harder. That's the way we're going to do it on the large tubes on the fuselage, rather than using foam if we can. But you just need to be careful because it's really easy to make the foam go away. So you just have to very carefully follow the contour to make the shape. You can see I did a pretty good job on this one. Pretty smooth. On this one, I removed a little bit more of the foam than I should have. But as long as we have enough, we just have to put some more glue in there. As long as we have enough to tack it on together, that's what you need. So, all right. The thing that's going to take the most time here is we have to do the 5-minute epoxy and glue these together. So I'm going to do that right now.
Just a minute.
Any more questions about this?
Just a minute, Alec. Wait, just come forward.
Yes.
Okay. The focus is not on the right place.
Yeah. So I'm going to, now that we've got these properly shaped, I'm going to take the pieces of paper off. This one I forgot to curl the edges over, so it's going to be more difficult to get it off. Hold on. And then I'm going to epoxy these together. And then, okay, I'm going to do this in a second. I'm going to get the epoxy started first. Then I'm going to get that going because the epoxy is the limiting thing here. It takes time to cure. Okay, so you just use 5-minute epoxy for this. If you can find the kind in a tube that does the mixing for you, or does the proportions for you, that's more convenient. So basically, I'm going to make a fair amount here because we have to glue both of these together. All right, and stir it. And I'm going to glue the 90-degree one now, and this will still be curing, and then I'm going to get the other paper template off so I can do the other one. So all I'm going to do, now I didn't have any sandpaper, so this is, you know, not going to be sticking quite as well as it would, but I would have pre-sanded this a little bit and pre-sanded the area around here to make the lashing stick better. And now I'm just going to put a bunch of the 5-minute epoxy in here. One thing to note when you're cutting this, when it first comes out, you'll notice that there are these very sharp peaks at the top. That's what the outside is, and because you're putting the wall thickness in, you actually have to, you know, shape the inside of the walls as well. But I find the part that comes up to the peak, it's not really doing anything to you to try to make this perfect peak, so I kind of round that off a little bit. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Instead of coming all the way up to the peak, I end up finding that to make it fit, you basically cut it out the way it says on the template, then you try to fit it, and if it doesn't fit, you adjust a little bit and sand until it fits well. Okay, now I'm going to glue this on. And
to be sure, Alec, there is no form in the tube that you don't machine, in fact.
Right, no, nothing in the tube that I'm machining, no.
Yeah.
I mean, it may have foam biscuits inside of it in various places, but you only have to put the foam in the one that you're making the fish mouth shape on, the miter. Yeah. That shape is called a miter, but it's also called a fish mouth shape because it looks like the mouth of a fish. Okay, and then I'm just temporarily going to tape this on just so it doesn't move, and I'm going to set this aside for 5 minutes to glue. And now I'm going to finish getting this one off so that we can glue this as well without gluing the paper template in the way. So it really makes a difference to curl over those edges of the tape, because then it's much easier to take off and move if you need to move the template, and I forgot to do that on this one. So it's holding me up a little bit. Okay, got that side. Okay, now I can remove the paper template and put my glove back on. Okay, hopefully this hasn't dried too much. Actually, it's gotten a little bit gooier, which is good. So now this one, because I removed a little bit too much of the foam, I'm going to put a lot of glue in there to make sure it sticks.
Yeah, I understand.
I was doing a really quick job 2 days ago when I thought we were going to be doing this, and I was running late. And so I was a little bit too aggressive with the sander. Okay, and then on this one, where's my other piece? There we go. We're just going to tape it like this. Now you can see the fit is not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be close. Close enough so that it fits well and that you can tack glue it well on there. Oh, now I can't see my video at all. All right. And then I need 3 hands for this.
Yeah, I can't help you.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna tape this. I mean, you don't have to tape it. You could just sit there for 5 minutes and hold it by hand if you want to. But if you're doing multiple things at once, just make sure that if you tape it firmly enough that you're still getting a good joint when the glue dries. Right. So I'm putting some pressure with the tape here to make sure that it actually holds it, and it seems to be holding it pretty well. Okay, now we're going to let that dry. while we're letting that dry, I'm going to show you how to make the these paper clips. So normally you have those paper clips that are a little bit more angular looking, that are shiny metal. These paper clips are metal, but they're coated with some plastic. It doesn't matter, just as long as they work. So we have sort of the normal spiral paper clips, but they just happen to be coated in little different colors of plastic. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to remove it to the second joint here. Oops, wrong one. And I'm going to cut right here. And then on this end, I'm going to use needle nose pliers to make a sharp little hook. And I'll show you I'm going to make, so far I've got 3 of these for this, since I'm doing 2 and 2 on each side. So I need a total of 4 for each setup. So I'm going to need 8 total. Mm-hmm. When you get to a larger tube than this is a 25 millimeter tube. If you go any larger than 25 millimeter, you want to do 3 of these per side. This will make more sense in a moment when I show you what I'm doing. Hold on, I got to see if I can reposition this so I can see myself, make sure I'm on camera. Okay. Is it in focus? You can see. Yeah.
It's in focus. Right. I think the network is not very clear, but perhaps if you record
on my end, you can probably record okay. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just going to make 5 more of these. So you just cut it here, and then you make a sharp little hook right here. So I'm sure I left the pieces that I was going to do a practice demo with there, and that probably has about 12 of these clips with it. And I think another time I came, I might have brought another 8 or 10 clips. So you probably have a bunch of pre-made clips hanging around already, if you can find them. But if not, just make 20 or 30 of these. It'll only take 5 or 10 minutes to do. It doesn't take very long to make each clip. And then just have them in a bag or a bucket or something where you can use them. Okay. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need 2 more. And you'll see the reason why I'm making this little curled over part in the end in just a moment when I start to use it. Okay, let me see if this looks like it's, yeah, the glue is somewhat drying. Nope, not yet. Oh, I hope I mixed it enough. Yeah, it's getting dry. It's just got a couple more minutes to go before it really dries. What else can I talk about while we're waiting? So remember, this is the Kevlar toe. This is a brand new roll, so it comes sort of tied at the end. You can undo it. And you really need to properly cut this. You need Kevlar shears. If you have a brand new sharp X-Acto knife or razor, you can cut through with the razor. It will dull after only a few uses, but you can do it. So that's what we're going to have to do here because I don't have Kevlar shears. And yeah, we're just going to have to wait on this step. I probably should have pre-done the other one. I tell you what, I can move this tape back a little bit and start putting the clips on. Let me clean this off. Second. Actually, I'm going to use my other gloves. A little bit of the epoxy dribbled down the side, so I'm going to clean that off. And yeah, this is getting really tight here now, so it's going to be done soon. Okay, now what I do is I take one of these hose clamps I've pre-tightened it so it's just a little bit loose to go around this one.
Mm-hmm.
You'll need various sizes of hose clamps. When we do this on the fuselage in the middle of May, you're going to need some very large hose clamps to go around the larger ones. But for now, I think you probably have the sizes you need. It's going to be something like this, you know, something that goes from 25 millimeters down to 15. I think the tubes that you're going to do are about 20 millimeter diameter. And now you take these clips that you've made and you put them in like this. So the little turned over clip hooks it onto here. And what you do is you do 2 on one side like this, spaced apart. This one is too long. It's not going to fit. Let me find another one that works. There we go. Okay, so 2 on this side. Okay, and then this is the hard part, is getting them not to move while you're getting them all lined up. And then you do 2 on the other side. I didn't make the clips quite long enough. Hold on. So I'm going to redo this and make the bend a little bit farther up. And as you get more of these in here, you may find it gets tighter and tighter. So you might have to loosen the clamp a little bit. There we go. One more to go. Let's try to pick one that's nice and long. This one looks like it might work. So the distance between this turn and this turn has to be bigger than the width of the hose clamp here. There we go. Okay, so now I've got 2 on this side and 2 on the other side. So I'm going to tighten this down a little bit while I hold the clips like this, just so they don't move quite so much. Then I'm going to flip around to the other side. One of them fell out. So I'm going to have to loosen it again. Loose enough to get it in there. Oh, the other one fell out. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to tighten it back down. I'm going to try to space these out a little bit. Space the other ones out. That. Okay. And then I tighten it down really good so they're not going to move. Okay?
Alec, could you show me in the camera? Just I can see it clearly.
So, I've got on each side, lined up with the side that they're going towards, I've got 2 clips here. Okay. Spaced apart so that they're about 1/3 of the way across the diameter of the tube. And then on the other side, I've got 2 more clips spaced here. Can you see it?
Yes, okay, I can see it now.
Yeah.
And the hook.
And if we did a large diameter tube, if you were doing a 50 millimeter tube, I would have 3 clips. One in the middle, 2 in the middle, 3 over here. But for something 25 millimeters or smaller, we just use 2 clips.
Okay.
Okay. So this is still not sticking very well, and I don't know why. This one is actually sticking better. I'm just going to fake it a little bit by using a little bit of CA to make sure that it doesn't move. So I'm going to stick some CA on here. Try to tighten that up. Okay, now, so basically all of that gluing was just so that these two don't move with respect to each other while we do the next step, which is to put the Kevlar on. So what we do is we take this five line, or whatever you want to call it, 5-string Kevlar toe, and we can either just tack it down with some CA or try to tie it around one of these to start it. I find that if I try to tie it around that, it's awkward. So I think the easier thing to do is just take it here, do a nice big glob of cyanoacrylate, then go around once around the clip. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to go between the clips here. We're going to go on this side. We're going to go back here. You notice this toe is made out of 5 strands, and they're kind of flat. They're not cylindrical, the strands. They're a little bit flat.
Okay.
So I try to rotate this so that most of the strands are flat over the edge. You see how it's kind of flat? And I'm spacing it out one to the other. So I'm going to do, I maybe didn't start, let me start this a little bit farther over to the left, just a second. I'm going to do the first one over a little bit farther just to give myself more space. So I'm going to start over there. Then I'm going to do the next one, and I try to align it nice and flat like that. Then I do the next one, I align it nice and flat. When I get to the middle, I switch over to the other set of clips, like this. Okay, makes sense?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, now what I do, this is the part I always have to think about when I do it, is you start doing these figure 8 shapes. So you go around and up, and then around the other way and up. And you do that a couple times. Again, trying to fill in places on the top. Okay, and then after you've done that a couple times, you come over to this side, and again, you keep trying to twist this to make it as flat as it can be when it's on here, just to have most coverage. So I'm sort of twisting this as I go to untwist the toe and keep it nice and flat. And then you just go here around here nice and tight. Okay. And then when you get pretty close to the clips, and notice I didn't really talk about the positioning of the clips, but I'm putting this, it's maybe 35 or 40 millimeters from here. If we're doing it on a much larger tube, we may do proportionally larger. So if we're doing a 60 millimeter tube to a 60 millimeter, this might be back at 60 or 70 millimeters back here, just to give you more room. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some CA, and I'm going to glue this really well and make sure that I get it into all the fibers so none of the fibers are loose. You can cure it with your breath if you don't have accelerator. The moisture in your breath will help cure it. So I often do like that. Don't breathe in when you're close, just breathe out. So that'll cure it. That's actually pretty much cured. I don't need to hit it with the accelerator now. Or I could have used the accelerator. I try not to use the accelerator too much because I don't want to get a bunch of other chemicals on here, because the main glue that I want to use is the epoxy. So now, using a very sharp blade, because this will dull it after only a few cuts, you can cut the Kevlar with that sharp blade. And now this is already basically, this isn't a very good 90-degree angle. I'm a little bit off, but anyway, you get the idea. This is all ready to infuse with the epoxy. Now, normally you would use the same laminating epoxy that you use on that we used on the Kevlar trailing edge, okay? And you also want to have the heat gun with you. You take a brush and you brush the epoxy on, and then you use a heat gun which heats up the epoxy and makes it less viscous, more runny.
Okay.
And that'll help it wet out the Kevlar, because the Kevlar is a little bit hard to wet out, and you want to make sure that all the fibers of the Kevlar get epoxy. And as you do it, you'll see that it changes from this very light colored yellow to much darker yellow when it gets wet. And so you want to make sure that everywhere is dark and there's no white patches. Any place that you put a little bit of CA, a little drop of CA, that will stay white because the glue can't get into it. So you'll notice, I'm not sure what's going to happen with the 5-minute epoxy because that's all I have. I'm going to use it, but I just want to explain. But you'll have a little white patch here where I put the CA. Okay. That's okay. But anywhere else, you want to make sure there's no white or light patches. You want to make sure that it's dark yellow, and that tells you that it gets in there. Okay, so I'm going to use just the 5-minute epoxy for this because that's all I have. But you definitely want to use laminating epoxy, not 5-minute epoxy when you do it for real. So I'm going to mix up some more. And see if I can save my stick. I'm not sure if I can. It's kind of glued in there. Yeah, that's okay. So I had some other pieces which I've now lost. So I'm going to quickly make a stirring stick. Okay, there we go. Okay, so again, this would be laminating epoxy with the brush, but basically you put the epoxy on, you take the heat gun and heat it up. Could I use a hairdryer for this? Would that be okay? Yeah, Linda's going to get the hairdryer, and I'm going to try using it.
Yeah, thanks.
This is even thicker than the laminating epoxy, so it's even harder for it to get it to wet out the. Huh? No, I won't. I'm going to take the glove off and just use. Actually, maybe can you just help me, and you can do the aiming, and then we'll be sure not to get epoxy on it. So I'm just getting it everywhere on here. She's going to put it on a high heat. Put it in the video just so you can see it for a second. Yeah, okay, now you can take it off. So that's going to help it. And now we can see, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but it's starting to get more yellow, darker yellow as it gets wet. And it becomes much less viscous when it gets hot. So that lets it soak into the... Okay, that's good. But keep it here because I'm going to do one more example. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, you can see it got much less viscous, much easier to flow as it got hot. The other thing that'll happen when you heat it up like that, this is 5-minute epoxy, so it's supposed to only take 5 minutes anyway. The laminating epoxy that might take 4 hours or 8 hours to dry will dry in half the time or a quarter of the time once you've heated it up, because that accelerates the process. Okay, so I'm going to go do the other one because I know you have limited time, but you let this dry. The next day you come back and you undo the clamp and take the clips out, and then you just do the same thing with a sharp razor blade or X-Acto blade, and you cut each of these off. And then I usually take a piece of the green tape just to terminate those ends and just make it look neat, and then put it around the end. And then you have a really strong joint made of Kevlar. So now let me do this one. This should be dry, and I'll show you the technique for tacking it as you're going across. Okay, so we have to, I gotta fix a couple of these. They're not quite long enough to fit under the. You okay on time?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just making these a little bit longer in this dimension so they'll fit easily under the hose clamp. And one more. I'm missing one. Maybe it got blown on the ground, so I'll just make another one. Okay, so same thing here. We take one of these hose clamps, and again on this one we're going to use two of these on each side. So one, got to loosen it up a little bit. Two on this side, and then flip it over. One, two on this side. All right, and now this is the hardest part, is getting it in place without having them all fall out of position. So I tighten it most of the way down so they don't move much. Then I adjust their position. Go. And I adjust their position so they're in about the right place. And then I tighten it down. And then you make sure you bend these back far enough that they'll capture. This one is still not adjusted very well. There we go. Okay, there we go. So we got two on each side, two on this side and two on this side, aligned with the plane of where we're going to do it. And then we just do the same thing as last time. We start by tacking this a little bit beyond with some CA. Then we go around. Actually, I'm going to start on this one. Okay. Now, the problem here, when you have more than about a 60-degree angle, you can see it's going to just slide down the tube. Okay. So what you do is you pick the spot you want, and at the crown, you put a little dot of CA. And then you can either do the accelerator method, or I'm not going to use the accelerator because each one that I do, the glue is going to dry right away because there's already going to be accelerator on there. So instead, I'm just going to spread it out thin. Sometimes that's enough to cure it, or I'm going to do that. Now it's basically held in place. You can go around to the next side, go over the next hook, try to spin this until this gets as flat as it can be, and you have all of the fibers spread out as much as you can. And then you just put another piece of CA on here. Spread it out so it cures. And then you go to the next one. And you just work your way back and forth like that, and that prevents it from moving. Not being patient enough. I need to wait for the CA to dry. It's still slipping a little bit. Okay, I'm going to do, I may have started a little bit too far down this way here. This is taking a lot of wraps to do this. All right, now I'm going to switch on the next time to, let's see, to the other clip. Now obviously these are small, short little pieces, so it's easy for me to just sort of manipulate it around. When you're doing it on the tubes in the plane, you're going to have to kind of push it under the thing and back over, and you're going to have to move yourself around rather than moving the piece around. It's cheating a little bit to do it with a sample piece like this because it's actually easier to do. But it's not that much harder to do even when it's in place. So see, I'm rotating this until there's no twist in these lines, and then it flattens out and covers the broadest area here. So the ones that you're doing on the support tubes on the end, you will have to use this technique because they're at an angle. The support tube in the middle is straight, so you won't have to use the cyanoacrylate. But the ones on the end at the end ribs are at an angle. Okay. And you can see also that because it's at a 45-degree angle, there's a lot more coverage that you have to have in order to get the lashing to
90.
To actually cover the whole thing, right? Square root of 2 more distance that you have to cover. And it goes slower because you have to do this gluing step every time. Okay, now we've got enough coverage here. We're going to start doing the thing where we go here, and then we do this figure 8 where we go around, halfway around, and then we come up and over. Again, you still have to tack each one. And then you come around and up and over. Sometimes when I'm coming around and up and over, if I see a spot on here that wasn't filled, I'll try to fill it when I do that way. Like here's a few spots that weren't filled. And now that there's Kevlar there, it's not slipping, so I'm not having to put a couple more figure eights like this. Go around this way. Okay, and now I've got enough of those figure eights back and forth, and now I just finish by going around like this. Again, trying to spread this out so you get the most efficient coverage. So as you're manipulating this around, it gets twists in it, so you have to untwist it until it looks nice and flat. There you can see the lines are all spread out. And then again, when you get about a centimeter from where the clips are, and you have enough coverage here, this is about 20-25 centimeters or millimeters of coverage, you tack the end down with CA, and then you take a sharp knife and cut it. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the other one. And again, this would be laminating epoxy, not 5-minute epoxy. 5-minute epoxy can work. When I was helping Inhai University, they had the front wheel strut broke, and so we put it back in place and then added another support tube and used this technique with 5-minute epoxy so that they could get back flying soon. And it made it a really strong joint. It made it so strong that the next time they had a hard landing, it broke off where the support tube came in. So proving that it can work with 5-minute epoxy. It's just better to use laminating epoxy for this. It's easier to get it to infuse into the fibers, and the laminated epoxy dries harder and stronger than 5-minute epoxy does. But in a pinch, you can use 5-minute epoxy. In a pinch, do they say that in French? What's the word when when you're in a tight spot, or in a trying to think of what the phrase would be.
I don't know. Pinch. When you're on the competition, or what do you mean?
No, when you need to use something quickly, or you need to substitute for a normal thing, a normal material with something else, or a normal process with something else to do it quickly. Yeah, when you're in a competition or something else, there's an English expression, in a pinch, and I just realized when I said it, you probably didn't know what that meant.
I would try to.
Yeah, when your back is against the wall, that's another expression that's kind of like that. Okay, so now I've got it covered. Can you come hit me with the hot stuff again? So she's gonna, so I've got it all wetted out on the top, but it hasn't fully made the fibers yellow. So now she's heating it up. And I continue to brush to help drive it into the fiber. If I had a brush, I would be going like this to kind of use the bristles of the brush to kind of push the epoxy. Okay, that's it. All right, and it got much less viscous, and it was easy to flow in there. You can see what I'm talking about here. You see how it's somewhat darker yellow here where it's got wetted out, but at the top it's somewhat lighter because that's where I put the cyanoacrylate every time. That's okay because the cyanoacrylate glue is holding it there. But if you see a big light colored patch somewhere here, that means that you need to get more epoxy in and hit it with the heat gun until it gets fully wetted out. So now that's fully wetted out and that should dry. And given that we did this with 5-minute epoxy last time, this is basically ready, so I can show you the end process. You undo this enough to get the clips out. You can reuse these clips many times, so if you just make yourself 20 or 30 clips, you don't have to make any more clips. I need to cut this. This fiber is not needed anymore, so I cut that and I can pull this off. I'm just going to take, it's easier to take this all the way off. There we go. Now you take these clips out. And again, you can reuse those clips many times. And then you can just go in with the sharp knife and trim these back. The knife's already starting to get dull, so it's not cutting as well. The Kevlar is very, very tough stuff. These loops are so short, I don't know if it's even worth cutting them off. And then you can just take a piece of tape.
Just to finish.
Favorite color tape, whatever you want to make nice and neat. We tended to use the green tape on DaSH, so we have lots of green tape on our airplane. But basically just terminate it by just doing a nice, neat tape job over the loose ends of the Kevlar. And even though this is it's only 5-minute epoxy and it's only had about 10 minutes to cure, you now have an incredibly strong joint. I couldn't break this if I tried. It's very, very strong.
Okay.
And I'll be able to do the same thing with this joint. You know, in 10 minutes from now when the epoxy's dry, I'll take that off and I'll cure it, and it will be nice and strong.
Okay.
All right. So you understand?
Yeah.
Any other questions about it?
No. It's clear. I hope the video will be more clear than what I see here, but it's okay.
Okay. Was it clear enough to understand what I was doing?
Yeah, it's clear enough. Yes,
Okay.
of course.
I'll let me stop the recording now, and then I will look at it after we're done, and I'll let you know.